6 months ago, on the 7th of October, Hamas carried out a horrific terror attack against Israel. Now, Israel's devastating response has led to political, humanitarian and diplomatic consequences. This has altered Israeli politics and national security. There have been deadly exchanges between Israel and Iranian proxy groups in the region. And things are not going too well for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu because there are calls for his removal, and those calls are getting stronger. From a regional to an international level, there are multiple areas where concerns spill well beyond the Middle East's geographic interests, not the least of which are attacks against commercial vessels in the Red Sea by Houthi militants and the revival of Somali piracy. And joining me to discuss this today are Itai, Melchior, Lieutenant General Rameshwar Yadav and my colleague Deepak Bhadana. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus Show. There was an attack on an Iranian consulate in Damascus a week ago, after which tensions have kind of spiraled and Iran has vowed retaliation. But strangely, over the last 1 week, there's been a certain silence, and which is a good thing. There have been a record number of 8 trucks that entered Gaza just yesterday, 322 8 trucks, the highest number since the war began. Is this the sign that, finally we could be at seeing the end of this war and that peace talks could begin?
Well, I'm sadly not the bearer of good news on this topic.
Right.
And also like to separate between the two issues. Yes, Israel has from the onset tried to supply humanitarian aid. We've seen airdropping by multiple countries, even Jordan, got permission to fly over Israeli airspace, and UK and Germany. Trucks have been entering, water pipes, etc. And we've also had the sad incident with the WCK aid workers that were targeted stake. But this is the request of the world. The world wants to see more humanitarian aid.
Right.
This is happening. But the campaign has not finished until Israel manages to get the hostages back.
Yes.
We still have 133 hostages, and we need to conquer Rafah. So until either Rafah is conquered and Hamas as a military power is obliterated, we will see the campaign going on.
Right.
This has nothing to do with what Iran will do to retaliate what happened in Syria, though one would think, why is such a high-ranking officer and his crew at all of Iran based in a building close to the embassy of Iran in Damascus? Right.
Mr. Melchior, the 133 hostages that you mentioned, that we were just talking about it, that their condition is of course of great concern, their health and their safety. But are you saying that that is the ultimate goal for the IDF, to basically rescue them, and only then will you pronounce mission accomplished? That's the most critical aspect of the military operation right now.
So that's an ongoing debate in Israel, but from the onset, there were 2 targets set.
Right.
One is to dismantle Hamas military capabilities. As a military, Hamas as an ideology will probably live on, as it does in many parts of the world. And the second, releasing the hostages. There are big demonstrations today in Israel saying hostages first.
Yes.
But in essence, from the onset, both from the Prime Minister, from the cabinet, and from the Chief of Staff of the military, those were the 2 main targets set out for the campaign. So unless we reach at least one of them, I don't see the campaign over.
Right, absolutely. And General Yadav, the news coming out of the Gaza Strip today suggests that Israel has withdrawn soldiers from southern Gaza. There's only 1 brigade left, as opposed to over a dozen brigades that were there when at the peak of operations. Do you see this, withdrawal of IDF soldiers as possibly to counter any mischief that maybe Hezbollah could do in the north, or is it just a process of rotation of troops?
Actually, one cannot say what exactly it is, but in situations like this, what I can make out is Israel is now trying to withdraw or strategically relocate these troops, so that whenever there is a requirement of reinforcement troops, they can bring them back. That is one point. At the same time, they are trying to score a political point, thereby conveying to the world that we are trying to de-escalate the entire situation. Now it's up to Hamas to come to negotiating table and release the hostages to start with, and also negotiate the further political issues with Israel, obviously on Israeli terms. I don't think there is any letdown at the first level or the intentions of Israel or the intentions of Hamas either. Both sides, there is a fair degree of intransigence in their perceptions and the point of view. So it is only one point that is slightly positive with what I say. You see, Israel is under pressure by her own colleagues like US, France, UK.
Yes.
They also want this war to stop. Now, Prime Minister of Israel has already committed more than what he can actually achieve, the total annihilation of Hamas, which is actually not possible. It is not a military target.
Right.
Because Hamas represents an ideology, and to kill an ideology which has got history, so it is very difficult. And the way the number of casualties, civilian casualties have taken place, obviously bound to be emotion of revenge against Israel in times to come. So probably in my point of view, Hamas will survive to fight another day. But as of now, obviously they are under pressure. They also want to reconcile, but they want to reconcile under their terms.
Right, they want to reconcile under their terms. And Deepak, I'm going to ask you a question, but first let me ask Mr. Melchior this point that General Yadav mentioned about eradicating Hamas, and the fact that Hamas is actually an ideology. It's actually, it would be very difficult to kill that ideology. You might actually, reduce the number of fighters or, physically eliminate their fighting formations. But how do you explain this? How do you fight an ideology like this? And we've seen what that ideology has done on the 7th of October, the kind of horrific violence that was inflicted on Israeli civilians. What's the long-term plan for this after the fighting zone?
That's an excellent question. The Muslim Brotherhood, which Hamas is just another arm of, is an ideology that has been very hard, and we are not the first to be trying to eradicate it. We've seen the world fighting it in different parts of the Middle East and Asia, but we've seen them regrouping in other parts of the Middle East and in North Africa and other places. But for us as a nation, the first step is to demilitarize it. So once it's not longer an army functioning as an army terrorist, you will keep having, and that is almost impossible to eradicate, but to stop the military capability as a military. The long-term goal, and we've seen our friends in the Gulf actually achieving this, is what we call deradicalization. And Israel will be very happy to see the friends from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, who have managed to do this, also help us in this process.
Right, very excellent observation there, Deepak. The fact that de-radicalization actually, and it's interesting that Mr. Melchior mentions Arab countries there who've done excellent work with de-radicalization. How much of a challenge is it going to be really for Israel to de-radicalize Hamas in the areas that it controls?
I think, yes, the gentleman just pointed out the effort has to come from the Arab side. Even MBS, in a recent interview, at a press conference, he said that, the Saudis are going to go after de-radicalization. It's something that they have to do now. That was what MBS said. So it's not something that Israel by itself will be able to, unilaterally be able to do. Israel can perhaps create the conditions that would foster it. But the effort has to come from within the Muslim Ummah, as it were. But I have a few questions, if I could ask Mr. Melchior. You've talked about de-radicalization and demilitarization of Gaza. But if I could take you back 6 months, at the launch of this Israel's counter to the horrific attack, what would you say could have been done differently? You talk about demilitarization or removing the military capabilities. Now, Israel did something like that in the 2006 war, and what the results are manifest. So is there something, there must be voices inside Israel which would be talking about other alternatives. And I'm not necessarily asking for a peaceful solution, but rather is there some conversation within Israel about a different approach?
Yes, but as always, you have the approaches from the two different sides. So one side said, well, maybe we shouldn't have gone so strong in an offensive and try to resolve everything in a peaceful manner, while the other side is saying, no, we should have gone more strongly in, we should have already finished, we shouldn't have stopped before Rafah. It's not our problem that the Hamas has created for its own population. So there are two contradicting voices, and I don't know, maybe the international viewers don't hear about this, but there's been demonstrations and actually civilians that have tried to stop some of the humanitarian aid flowing into Gaza and disrupt the truck routes, and the police also had to deal with that to clear those routes from Israelis who were saying, no, let's apply more pressure on Hamas, who is the sovereign of the region, and stop those trucks. So both the criticism from both sides exists, and in the end, I think that Israel has reached most of its targets, and the fact that we're only left with Rafah, and in my opinion, it's a question of weeks. First, we will finish Ramadan and the Eid. Right. The US is working alongside Israel, despite its criticism on humanitarian issues. It's working alongside Israel to find a way to remove the civilians who have flocked or escaped to Rafah, so Israel can launch the final offensive on the last stronghold of Hamas in Rafah.
Right, so there you go, final offensive against Hamas's last stronghold, Rafah, that seems to be coming there. Thank you very much, Itai, Melchior, for joining us this evening, General Rameshwar Yadav and my colleague Deepak Bhadana.